we can tell as normal citizens of this country, we're not being represented, and our beliefs are not reflected in our government. But they don't talk about this convention, a way for the people to directly affect the way our system works. Congress was a problem. They weren't part of the solution, and we needed to figure out a way to go around Congress. So I opened up the Constitution, looked at it, and it described this convention. And over 200 years of states applying for this, and they have continued to ignore it all this time. And right now, they're showing 38 states on the board. Again, it only takes 34 states to trigger this convention. And it's still, they're not doing anything. They're not.
Do you want to save some serious money? Learn how a simple gadget can double your gas mileage while creating less pollution. This simple gadget does all of this while giving your car more power and longer engine life. Learn more with the link below.
I'm Sarah Westall. I am going to talk about Article 5 with Dan Marks. He has been leading this initiative to talk about the abuse of power that Congress and the federal government has had over the states since the founding of our country. And he's going to talk about this part of our Constitution that requires a state convention to be held if 34 states ask for it. And historically, they've been asking for it. So he's going to talk about it and what that means and how this initiative is going through Congress to follow the Constitution. And he's going to explain where it's at and also how you can get involved to help that out as well. One thing he says that I think is important is that when the political parties get involved, they're either blaming it on Soros or the Koch brothers, but in reality, it's a nonpartisan movement of people that are really trying to put this together. It's not one side or the other. And I think that's really interesting because I think anytime you get parties involved, people start fighting and they don't even care what the issues are. They need to win. And I think the more we can stop thinking about parties and just look at how we can structurally change things, and especially if this was in the Constitution, why are we not following it? And it all ties back to 1913 when we stopped following this. And he stays around for my patrons, and he talks about more detail about the laws that are going through and how it started back in 1913, where things just got weird back then. Nobody that's alive today was alive at that point when they were doing it. So it's all fresh new Congress people. Nobody's at fault, but that's when it happened. And he wanted to make sure to say that no one's at fault because he wants these Congress people to work with them. And historically, so far, they have been. Really interesting conversation. Before we get into the interview, I want to talk to you about 2 free health summits that are coming up. One is the truth about cancer. What we've heard about cancer in the mass media from mainstream doctors is not true. And there's a free summit about the truth of cancer. 1 in 6 people, a lot of people get cancer now. And your loved ones, everybody knows somebody that they care about who has gotten cancer. So take a look at this, and if you know anybody, share it and get the word out on this free summit, and I'm sure it will help whoever it is in your life that is suffering with this awful disease. And then the second one is a free ebook. Actually, it's not a health series, it's an ebook on cannabis, on 500 jobs that are available in the cannabis market. If it's something, this industry is growing so fast, so rapidly, it's one of the fastest growing industries in our country, in the world, and there are so many opportunities. And so this ebook is a way for you to learn whether it's something that you could get involved in. Can you make money at it? Would you enjoy it? So that is a link below as well. So now let's get into my interview with Dan Marks. Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for joining the program.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and a great opportunity to tell people about Article 5 and correct some of the myths that are flying around out there. So thanks for having me on.
Well, I really like to have people that are really trying to make a difference and really studying what's happening out there. And I got your name, and I said, this is someone I need to talk to. You have been investigating the abuses of the federal government against the states for a long time. What made you start looking into this?
Well, I would say, I think the Gabby Giffords shooting back in 2011 kind of made me understand that there was some anger beneath the surface that really hadn't been addressed. And I kind of felt like it's only going to get worse and worse until we start making systemic change in this country and really start listening to the people and kind of putting things into effect that we need and that we want, that we demand. And, we can tell as normal citizens of this country, we're not being represented and our beliefs are not reflected in our government.
Well, that's clear. And, yeah. And you go ahead.
Sorry.
Well, you've been uncovering different agendas that the states have been trying to put forward, and
Correct.
and the federal government has been ignoring it, and they should be observing. Can you talk about what has happened and how the states have
Sure.
lost so much of their power that were originally granted to them?
Sure, absolutely. The area where I got involved, where I felt like we can make systemic change, is the Article 5 Convention. A lot of people don't know about it. In fact, before I really became interested in it, I'd never heard about this either. Oddly enough, they'll tell us about franking privileges and pigeonholing in committees and things like that about our government in high school civics classes or college, but they don't talk about this convention, a way for the people to directly affect the way our system works. It's like James Madison said, that the power of the Constitution springs from the people. So that's kind of where I was headed. I didn't realize it was there in the Constitution, but I knew that Congress was a problem. They weren't part of the solution, and we needed to figure out a way to go around Congress. So I opened up the Constitution, looked at it, and it described this convention. And it was like a light turned on over my head, and you can hear the angels from the heavens sing that there is a solution out there, and so I started investigating, and I started telling people we need to apply for this convention. People haven't done it yet. We've never done this in our nation's history. We've always had amendments proposed by Congress. Well, after so many months of looking into this, I stumbled across some information where there was a history of applications from state legislatures for this convention to propose amendments to the Constitution on various issues. And in fact, the first application was from the state of Virginia in 1787, not too long after the Constitution was created. And states have been applying for this convention ever since. A lot of times they'll talk about various issues, from the abolition of slavery to the direct election of the president or senators, also balanced budget amendment, right to life, apportionment of congressional districts, number of different issues. Also getting rid of the federal income tax. A lot of people seem to like that idea. So there's a lot of different things out there that the states have requested this convention in order to try to discuss solutions. It only takes 34 states, 2/3 of the country, to trigger this convention. And I took the records that were in the congressional record, and I took them to Congress, asked the clerk of the House of Representatives to verify a list of states that I had collected and their applications, and tabulate those and let us know how many states they see on the board as applied. And I sent in 42 applications from 42 different states, and the response was, we don't have a process to count these. Well, it's been over 200 years of states applying for this, and they have continued to ignore it all this time. And long story short, we finally got Congress to create a rule posting these applications online. They're still going through them. They're physically going through old dusty boxes in the bottom of the House Judiciary Committee building and getting out the original applications from these state legislatures. posting them online for people to see. And right now, they're showing 38 states on the board. Again, it only takes 34 states to trigger this convention. And still, they're not doing anything. They're not really taking any action to respond to the states after hundreds of years.
Well, okay, it was 38 states on the board. Mm-hmm. Now, was that from hundreds of years, or is it each year, or is it on the same issue? I mean, what kind of rules does it have to, what would trigger that?
Well, I'm glad you asked. The topics are various, and they're going backwards. So you'll see 2018 going back to 1960 right now. And it's still not complete. They're putting up a lot of applications. It's if you print it off, it's 5 pages long, the list. So there's I don't know, 100 some odd applications there from all these different states, and some of them are rescissions. And the language is, and I'll pull it up here and read it to you real quick. It says right on the website, the chair of the Committee on the Judiciary has designated for public availability for the following memorials presented under House 3 of Rule 12. Each memorial purports to be an application of the legislature of the state calling for a convention for proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States pursuant to Article 5 of the Constitution or rescission of a prior application. So right there it tells you the qualification for the application is that it merely has to purport to be an application. There's no set way, there's no form that they need to fill out. If both houses of the state legislature request this convention from Congress in any way, they have to accept it. They don't have any discretion over those applications.
Well, so once 34 states in the history of our country say they want a convention, we have to have one?
Absolutely. In fact, the language of Article 5 says Congress shall call. They don't have any choice in it. The shall is peremptory. They have to do it.
Have you heard about plasma energy and all the amazing healing potential it has? Many have experienced how plasma energy can help your body. Recent university tests have shown the effectiveness of balancing plasma energy and putting your body back into biological balance. Tests have shown success in lab animals and human beings by altering conditions of cancer, AIDS, diabetes, malaria, Ebola, E. coli, high blood pressure, brain issues in adults and children, and many other imbalances in the body. Learn more from Dr. Paul and researcher Lynn Schmaltz and how they are using plasma energy to help people heal. See the link below.
Well, what would happen then at this convention? All the different issues that came up would then be re-voted on, or how does it work?
Well, obviously, slavery has already been addressed. They probably wouldn't talk about that again. The convention, again, is not the applications are for the convention pursuant to Article 5 of the Constitution. The convention proposes amendments. These applications are not applications for an amendment. They're an application for the convention. And that is where a lot of confusion stems from. When you take a look at these blogs and news stories on this convention, people are under the impression that they are applying for a specific amendment. That's not the case. The delegates will meet just like the Senate, and as a temporary fourth branch of the government, they will discuss whatever issues are pressing of the day. If there's urging from their state to discuss a balanced budget amendment, or a way to get money out of politics, or right to life, or eliminating the federal income tax, or
they can do anything, right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, basically, once you do a convention, then you can put whatever you want forward to be voted on or discussed, or how does it work? It's never happened before, right? Are there rules defined on what should be done in these conventions, or how they should be run?
only in the Constitution in itself, and you have to sift through all the other language. And Article 5 is very short. It's one paragraph. Here it is. That one paragraph. At the end of that paragraph, you're going to find that the limitation for the convention is exactly the same as it is for Congress. Congress can discuss basically anything that they want, with one exception. No state without its consent shall be deprived of equal suffrage in the Senate. So they can't take away the senators from the state of Wyoming or, reduce it to one. And the idea behind that was this convention can do almost anything to change this system of government. But even if they strip everything away, all that we have left is what was basically what we started with, the Articles of Confederation. And basically that Senate is a reflection of that Articles of Confederation in this Constitution. So
they can do anything they want in this convention aside from doing what was the core of what was started.
Exactly. I mean,
it doesn't have to get approved through the Senate or by the president?
It does not. The president is excluded from the amendment process. Once the amendments are proposed either by Congress or a convention, they go out to the states. The Congress chooses which method the states will ratify. It takes 3/4 of the states, which right now is 38 states, to ratify any amendment. And they can ratify that either with the legislature of those states, again, without the governor signing or anything like that, or the Congress could choose to send it out to the states and have them form ratification conventions. Ratification conventions have been used 2 times, one to ratify the original Constitution, which wasn't under Article 5 because that was still under the old Articles of Confederation. But technically it was under Article 7 because it does say this shall be ratified by 2/3 of the states, actually, in the Constitution. But the other time that they used the ratification conventions was to eliminate the prohibition of alcohol. And the reason that they sent it to conventions was the idea of eliminating alcohol or prohibition and kind of being pro-alcohol was not politically palatable to a lot of the state legislators. So to take the politics out of it, Congress chose to send it to conventions, which were comprised of normal, common people like you and I, and they decided, that alcohol should be legal again. So
interesting. So we could do that on all sorts of issues. Now, do you foresee? Is there a big push to do this right now that you're seeing and that you're talking to people on specific issues?
Well, there definitely is. Different groups out there proposing different amendments and supporting this method of proposing those amendments. A lot of those groups are focused on their specific agenda. And honestly, they focused on the agenda almost more than the method. And they haven't really looked into that method in such a way to realize that there are plenty of states that are already on the board as applied. The states have submitted enough applications for this to happen right now. And I actually had a meeting with Congressman Jared Polis of Colorado 2nd District and the parliamentarian of the House of Representatives, Tom Wickham, last summer. We had a phone call together, and there were a couple other people on the call as well. But we were discussing the list and the requirements of Congress, the duties of Congress, and how they respond to this and obey Article 5 of the Constitution. And what it came down to was they can't. They've never in all of this time created a method of responding to these applications in a joint session of Congress, and they've never created a way to tabulate these applications for both houses. The list that I got them to create and start, that you'll see online, it's only for the House of Representatives. It has to match up with the Senate. So they're still trying to get their act together as far as how to respond to it, and they're not quite ready to do that.
Well, how much
There's
time do they get? I mean, at some point,
no
they
time.
could say, that's what I'm saying. At some time, they could just have, well, we don't have our act together. They could not have their act together for centuries.
Correct. In the Constitution, it says on the application of 2/3 of the states. We've passed it. They missed it. So as soon as they actually finish counting it, they're going to realize, well, before they even finish counting it, they're going to realize that, well, we've got to do this. And there might be some people out there that will tell you all these applications have to match up. They all have to be for the same issue, and we have to have that one convention for that one issue, for maybe the balanced budget amendment.
But that's not true, right?
That's not true. It does not say that on the application of on the identical application of 2/3 of the states, or on the similar application of 2/3 of the states. And it also says that it's a convention for proposing amendments in the plural. So it's more than one. And it's not limited.
It's not, they're not, the whole point isn't to propose amendments. The whole point is we want a convention. That's all the application is saying. So for them this is narrative that they're creating at this point, because there's no confusion in the way that the Constitution is written as to what it means. Right.
And actually the Supreme Court did take a look at that, and they said that any attempt to impose new rules on the Constitution, it would be rules of construction. It's simply when 2/3 of the states apply, Congress shall call, and that's it. And that's where a lot of the confusion has been. And you'll hear a majority of people in law schools actually teach this incorrectly. But we're about to verify this right now, that to actually get a statement from the parliamentarian, another one where it's in process, we're trying to get that, where we can confirm that there is absolutely no law, rule, or court ruling that would instruct Congress that when they start reviewing these applications, they have to aggregate them by subject matter. It's just that rule true. Doesn't exist. In fact, they thought about doing this, and they proposed in 2015 an amendment to the Constitution in the House Judiciary Committee, HJ Resolution 34, which is House Joint Resolution, because it has to go through both houses, 2/3 of both houses. This is actually a constitutional amendment proposal, and the proposal's title is called Proposing an Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, allowing the states to call a limited convention solely for the purpose of considering whether to propose a specific amendment to the Constitution. They wouldn't even think about this amendment to the Constitution if that was already the case. The case is that when 2/3 of the states apply, Congress shall call.
And it's not that risky for the country in the sense that you cannot do more than the core of what the Constitution originally had. So we're protected that way, but Congress loses so much power with this. So I would imagine this would freak them out.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you're the most applied for amendment in modern times is the balanced budget amendment. That would force Congress to live within a budget.
What about the 22 trillion? Taxes. How about the 22 trillion that's missing?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, they would have to be much more responsive to the states. They don't want to do that. The other one that it was very popular for many years, many applications for it from many states. I think even 39 different states have applied for it. I could be wrong. I don't want to, but many states have applied for it. Again, elimination of the federal income tax for obvious reasons. Nobody wants to pay taxes. For years, 100 years, we didn't have a federal income tax. It was all tariffs. So, we could go back. There's no reason we couldn't do that.
Well, exactly.
People want to get rid of the Federal Reserve. There's so many different moving parts, but the real backstop to this process is the convention is only an opportunity to come up with ideas, come up with proposals and language. Ultimately, it's going to be the decision of 38 states, which means that only one house in 13 states can veto any proposal. So the idea of trying to pass something that's controversial is almost impossible.
Well, so what does that mean? Only one house in 13 states?
Either if the House or the Senate in a state legislature votes against this, then it's not ratified by that state, which means only 13 states. If one house in those 13 states votes against it, the proposal's dead. It's not going to get ratified.
So out of the 34 states, 13 have to vote it down, or just one out of the 34?
Out of all 50 states. When all 50 states consider the amendment, if only 13 states don't ratify it, they will not reach the 38 states required.
Okay, so 38 states have to ratify it.
Yes.
Whatever happens, the other ones can vote against it, but as long as 38 states ratify it, it's golden.
Correct.
Now,
that's
go ahead.
really, really tough.
Well, I would think so. Now, do you foresee there being some major shifts occurring? I mean, people are pretty upset. There's some pretty serious things that we want to see adjusted here. Do you think that once something does get passed, that it almost will open up a floodgates, or do you think it's such a high bar, the 38 states, that won't happen? I mean, basically, will we start going around Congress by doing this because we're so frustrated?
You know, that's a really good question, and I've put a lot of thought into this, and a lot of people that I associate with in this effort. You know, we talk about what's really possible to pass through that kind of process, and you know, we might see a balanced budget amendment pass in a convention, but we find it really hard to believe that it would actually get ratified by 38 states if it would require Congress to raise taxes in order to cover an annual budget deficit. That's probably, as they start to hash it out through the process, that's probably going to become less popular. But, you know, there are a lot of things that people do want to address, but one of the things that is very popular on both sides of the aisle these days is the legalization of marijuana. A lot of states have already started to do that. We might see that get very popular.
That's kind of an easier one. How about like something like audit the Fed?
It could be. I kind of see some things that are more nudgy, academic kind of issues getting some traction, like a national initiative process, which most states now have. So states have kind of been a testing ground for a lot of these different democratic tools for many years. So you might see those kinds of things graduate to the federal level. Recall of senators, recall of presidents. Those things are not really left or right either. They're much more broad, universal ideas, and again, you might see a little bit more consensus on that. But ultimately, any amendment to the Constitution is going to require significant unanimity. And
so it's going to be hard. So what is your goal in this whole process?
Well, you know, I'm ready for all kinds of change. And my attitude about this has just been, may the best amendments win. I want to see this country solve a lot of problems because we've kicked the can down the road for decades and decades. And I honestly, I would love to see us evolve into the Star Trek society, but I know that's not going to be possible. So, you know, if an amendment really does manage to pass with that amount of consensus, I'll probably be in favor for it, whatever it is. But you know, I'm open to it. I could see things like death with dignity. Everybody has to die. They call it humane to put our animals to sleep. I had an uncle that suffered for years with chronic disease, MS. He was in bed for 11 years. Those kinds of things, they're just they just go beyond politics, and they're our fundamental values. And I think those are the kinds of things we can actually see get some traction. The things that are controversial, like English being a universal or national language, or that's going to be tough. It's very controversial, and I don't see it getting too far.
Well, and honestly, if there's something that'll kick the Congress in the butt to start doing something and get serious, I'm all for it. You know?
With dealing with Congress, I've talked with members of Congress, and I believe in my heart they want to do good things. But the system itself, the institutions of Congress, really
Broken.
don't work. Yeah, they don't have an opportunity to represent us the way they want. Um, I've heard a lot of frustration, of a lot of hopes, and things they wanted to accomplish, and then they say, well, in all this time, all I was able to do was X, and it's just not even on the high priority list. It was just one of those things they were able to actually get done, and it's pretty sad. We've got a government that is on the verge of shutdown every quarter. It
Yes.
seems like we can't decide to pay our bills all the time. There's some big problems, in having the face-to-face discussion instead of lobbing sound bites at each other through the media is a great opportunity for us to really knuckle down and tackle these issues without all the politics involved.
Well, we don't even talk about serious issues. I mean, we have censorship problems. I mean, there's no like real debate anymore because people are even afraid to ask questions.
Right. Well, yeah, I've even heard one law professor talk about the notion of just coming up with an amendment to add to the end of all of the Bill of Rights that says, and we really mean it, because they keep violating them all the time.
Yeah. Well, some of them are so ridiculous. Maybe we just clean it up and get some of these really ridiculous laws off the books too that nobody will follow because they're so absurd.
Right. And ultimately too, I hope that this is an opportunity that once we assemble as we the people, and this is traditionally something that is participated in by common people. You take a look at state constitutional conventions throughout history, other national constitutional conventions around the world. The delegates are typically common people just like you and I. And if we assemble in that kind of scenario, I would kind of hope that we would, take a look at this opportunity and say, hey, do we really want to give that much power back to Congress or the president? Or I hope that something like direct democracy with the initiatives gives us a way to kind of head off the ways that they've used to obviate the Constitution with different laws and rules and methods, and we can kind of correct those and say, no, really, it's supposed to be like this, and like the War Powers Act. That's one where it's supposed to be a vote of Congress, and so far we let the president make that decision, which is a lot easier than a Congress, and so we end up having more war because of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's something we could take back. Now, how many people are involved in this initiative? Is it growing?
Again, there's a lot of different groups pushing their own specific amendments. There aren't too many people like myself that have been focused on just the method of the convention itself. So it's really not. And lately there's been a lot of blowback as far as, one side says it's the George Soros convention, the other side says it's the Koch brothers convention,
Yeah.
and neither one is right. It's not. The Koch brothers are not donating to this, and George Soros is not donating to this. I have a day job. This is what I do for a hobby. Well, maybe as a duty more than a hobby, but it's I don't get paid for this. The people I work with do not get paid. It's more of a patriotic sense of duty. I think that in some ways knowing this information kind of becomes a burden, where you kind of wait for the cavalry to come in and say, all right, we got this. But that doesn't happen. That's why we're engaged with Congress to try to get them to obey their obligations under Article 5.
Well, how can more people get involved? Where can they learn more about this and get involved?
Well, we've got a group on Facebook, the Article 5 group. Article 5 is Article V is a Roman numeral 5. And we're also articlev.org, article5.org. You can go to our website, but, honestly, engage in the group. People are coming up with different ideas. We have members of those other various amendment groups in that group, and it's people from the right and the left, and you really do get the sense of the people that are in there that they want to put the partisanship aside and just kind of address those issues that trouble the country.
Yeah, start to fix some of these structural issues. Well, thank you so much for coming. Will you stick around for my patrons and do a little special thing for them?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners. And please do support the Article 5 effort. And it is a great opportunity for us to make those changes. And whatever the product is, you can know that it is the genuine product of a democratic republic.